Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third of our webinar series on CRM data management. Today, we're going to kind of tie it all together. We're going to be talking about the best practices with CRM data management. So, as usual, I'm your host, Janine Ponarelli. I'm the Director of Marketing. And my co-host today is Matt Kaseska. He is a database security expert, managing partner of Networks Consulting Resources. So
hello, everybody.
Before we get into the best practices, we want to recap and kind of tie in everything else that we talked about in this series. So the first webinar that we did, we talked about, first of all, understanding whether or not your CRM is actually secure, thinking about some things that play into that security that maybe you haven't thought about in the past. And then we dove into setting up a security monitoring strategy. What's that all about? What kind of steps do you need to take for that? So to recap that for us, Matt's going to start us off.
All right, everybody. Just as far as initial security measures, patching I've found with new clients is probably one of the biggest things that we don't do. The fallacy is that we have to do it manually. That's not true. There's plenty of good tools out there that can manage your patching. You have to have a sandbox or test it first to make sure it's not blowing anything up. And then we usually do our patching a week, sometimes two, depending. Usually Microsoft is the one that will delay us an extra week. But there are tools out there that you need to take a look at, and I'll mention some of those later. Consider tools to check data validity. There's a couple here. One that you might want to write down. It's free. It's called Scuba. It analyzes a couple thousand different common problems like weak passwords, missing patches, things like that. And there's another App Detective Pro, uncovers configuration mistakes, access control issues, and again, patching. Utilizing your firewall filters just to keep your data safe, making sure that the people that are accessing this data are supposed to. And if if the configuration and the security is beyond your knowledge, call the manufacturer of the firewall, and they'll walk you through it. But don't take shortcuts on that for sure. Zero-day ransomware is a must. There's a big difference between having antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-ransomware. That is your baseline. That's a must for sure. But the zero-day is a custom-built ransomware that they push out to your company, knowing a little bit about you, and it is targeted for you. So there is going to be no profile on the planet that's going to see that. So it's going to sit on your network, and it's going to capture all your logins and things like that, if at all possible. So be very careful of that. Some zero-day ransomware would be like a dark trace is a great zero-day threat repellent. Assign lowest permissions to the newest employees and limit number of people with admin privileges. That's some of those softwares that I was talking about, Scuba, App Detective. Those will go through it and automatically give you a report back. Again, if you're doing any of this stuff manually, don't do that. It's way too much time, way too much effort, and we all know we're super busy anyway. Document your protocols to secure endpoints. Create a process and a system and groups, and then what groups have access to what areas of that database. And it can be it's a living document. And then ask good questions when a new person comes on board by their hiring manager or HR, what kind of access they need, and then put them in that group. Don't give out individual security access. It should be group driven. Otherwise, you're going to make a mess for yourself down the road. Router SSIDs and mobile device management is always a big deal. Cisco has some really good mobile device management tools out there, and obviously they have some of the best routers on the planet. So those are two things there that we can look at. And as far as slide 5 here, Let's see here. Pushing that to you guys. There we go. And setting up your CRM security monitoring strategy. And this is kind of a repetitive thing that Deneen and I have been talking about is, and I know we're all busy, but you have to document what you already have. There's a couple good ways to do it. If you don't have the time, get an intern from a local college or university, have them come in and document what you currently have. There's also some really good programs out there too that can map what you currently have in infrastructure and how people access it and things like that. Work with your CRM implementer or outside security party to go over your company's security concerns. So it's always good to have a third party audit you, and you want to obviously have someone that's a friendly that's doing this, so that way if they see something, you guys can work together to resolve that versus causing a firestorm for yourself. Or maybe you have some friends in the industry that can take a look at it as long as it's not violating security protocol. Step 3, automate what you can and make a plan for everything you can't. My experience is that you can automate probably 90% of the stuff that we deal with. You just have to take time to do some research and see what software is out there. Some's free. It's usually worth what you pay for it. But if you can get a budget together and you can build an ROI framework for your superior to show them that it's going to save this amount of time, and that's usually the way you get some of the software that I'm talking about to automate some of the tasks for yourself. Make someone the point person for execution of the plan. So if you're in charge of a team, don't throw it out to the team and say, hey, you guys have to take care of this. Pick one person that you trust that is a detailed-orientated person, and make them the point guard, and then put a rhythm together once a week, once a month to go over start, stop, continue, I call it. What are we going to start doing? What are we going to stop doing? And what's working? Okay, start, stop, continue is really good. Reevaluate your approach every year, and because with technology it's moving so fast, you have to. It's not an option. Compare to any processes or compliance teams that may have changed. So going out to conferences, talking to other people, be inquisitive, and have that lifelong learning kind of mentality, and you'll be fine in that area. And I think I'm going to throw it to you, Deneen.
Thanks, Matt. Quick question for you. Is the text on the slide that you're looking at cut off? Or is that just my screen?
It is not cut off for me. Oh, you know what, though? I'm looking at the file you sent me. So I'm not looking at it through the viewer.
Guys, if yours is cut off, I apologize. I don't know why. I have the exact same PowerPoint up on my other screen right now, and it looks perfectly fine. So I will make sure to send you these slides as well, just in case that is the experience you're all having.
And I'm looking at slide 5 here, Deneen, and it looks fine to me.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, slide 5 did not look fine to me. So
okay, good.
In any case, I'll send everybody the slides, so we're good. All right, so CRM data security best practices. One thing you'll note is at the bottom of your screen, those little widgets that you can always click through. I've summarized in there in a PDF document what these things are and the questions you need to keep in mind, so you can have that, keep it on your desktop, print it out, whatever you want to do. Keep it handy so that when you're ready to do this with your team, you have that to reference. So feel free to download that. In addition, obviously, if any questions come up during the presentation, you can reach us through the Q&A, or if you're thinking of things afterwards or you have a personalized question that you want to have addressed, both Matt and my contact information is in that widget area as well, so please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to help out. So the good news about data security best practices is that a lot of these can be implemented using things that you already have, namely your CRM system and your teams. And so it's just a matter of using the tools at your disposal and getting your teams on board with these 4 major best practices. So we're starting with auditing your data, because how are you going to know what needs to be changed and fixed if you don't do an initial assessment, right? So first we want to identify data assets and prioritize based on value. So basically you have to think about which of your company's solutions contain customer data. Most likely it's almost all of them. So then you have to think about which pieces of data have the most commercial value to you. Some companies might look at that and say, oh, definitely email addresses. Another company might look at it and say, definitely social media followers. Once you determine those important assets, you have to rank them. And I cannot stress this enough. Whether you're doing a CRM data security assessment, or if you're buying a CRM, or literally any piece of software, ranking features is one of the most important things you can do. And the reason for that is because in this particular case, I'll talk about auditing your data, and then I'll also talk about how that applies when buying software. But for auditing your data's purposes, you want to know as you go through this process, you're going to clean your data, you're going to establish rules for your data. You have to keep in mind exactly what the most prioritized actions have to be, and the only way to do that is to have those assets ranked. If email addresses are just as important as social media, that's not going to help you. You have to know what is my number one, what is my number two, and what's my number three. And that's a crossover into software buying. If you're looking at a software, I'll just use CRM because obviously we're most familiar with that one. We've had customers who say, well, I want this, 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 and this. Well, those are all great things, but when you go out into the CRM universe and you start researching these companies, you see that they give you this laundry list of all these different features, right? So now you're being distracted by all the shiny objects, and you start to get overwhelmed because you think, well, that could be cool or that could be nice. What prioritizing a list does is keep you focused on the task at hand and keep you focused on what's most crucial for your business. There are things that are nice to have, but it's better to know the need to haves and to stay focused on those first to know that all of your business needs are going to be met. So that's a big one. After you've identified those top 3 or 5 most crucial commercial value assets, then you have to interview your team leaders. You can talk to department heads, managers, other leaders, find out who's using the data, how are they using it, where are they accessing it? So is it just the desktop? Are they using it on their mobile phone? Maybe you have a lot of sales reps in the field. There's something to consider, your mobile security. And then are there any problems that they might encounter accessing that way? And I know in a previous webinar in this series, Matt was talking about a client that he had that was using a mobile application, and she was on a unsecured network, and they got hacked and all their data was compromised. So those are things that we have to consider if we have a lot of field sales agents or people outside of the office working remotely. Things that also may come up are, wrong phone numbers or outdated email addresses. So interviewing team leaders gives you an idea of what their particular sector is struggling with, and then you can start to compile those. And then you want to look at access restrictions. You want to grant access based on hierarchical, that's a toughie, as needed basis, so only relevant to certain team members. Decide who those relevant team members are by getting feedback from the team leaders, and then implement that. So, for example, the entire sales department probably needs access to customer information like email addresses and phone numbers, but maybe only certain members of upper management are handling the invoices. So maybe it's not important for certain people to have access to those invoices. Things to think about. Okay, so the next step in the best practices is cleaning your data. And that involves all these things. Again, I mentioned a lot of this can be accomplished using your CRM, so yay for that. We'll start with filtering. You want to use the filtered search in your CRM to find the records that are missing the key data that you identified during your initial audit. So for example, you could search for records whose email address equals blank, and that reveals how many of those contacts are missing that detail. What you could also do then is take that a step further, and let's say you notice that Joey Fatone's got a bunch of contacts in the CRM, and his are the ones that are mostly missing the email addresses. Well, if you filter by record owner, then you can assign the task of updating those records to that team member, and you could say, here are the records that are missing emails. Please, work on getting these filled out by the end of the month or what have you. Then we have bulk edits. So bulk edits and segmentation rules, they let you update records missing generic or common information. So that would be like maybe a state or a country, for example. And you can use segmentation to find the records that fit a particular criteria beyond the contact details alone, and then bulk edit those results. So for example, maybe you segment deals filtered by a certain status, and then you bulk edit them to change all the statuses at once. Exception reports, those are a great way to find incomplete records. Run those every month to keep your data on point, or at a cadence that makes sense for your business. We recommend every month, but some businesses might want to tweak that. Merging and deleting. Before deleting or merging any duplicate records, always ask the owner of that record to verify which is the most accurate. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in an upcoming slide. But, there are times when you have two different records and one maybe has one email address attached to it and one maybe has multiple email addresses attached to it, and it's seemingly the same record, but it's possible that that contact has various points that they like to be contacted through, and the sales rep in charge of that knows, okay, I use this email if I want to contact them about this, or this email if I want to contact them about that. So discussing that first is the better way to go. And in any case, if you can avoid deleting something and simply merge it instead, that's always the better route to go, because then you know for a fact you're not missing any information. It's better to merge them and then maybe say, oh, here's a little duplicate, let me delete that out of the merged contact, instead of, oh, we lost it completely, now what do we do? If you have a bigger mess, so your data is out of control, you might want to consider purchasing a tool to help you clean it. One that comes to mind is our sister company, Starfish ETL. Starfish ETL is mostly known for its uses in CRM migration and integration, but part of the playbook of Starfish ETL is the ability to help you clean your data before and after that process. And when you work with the Starfish ETL team, they will help you stay organized as you move your data to keep everything in line as it should be. Okay, so this one's going to be a little long-winded, but bear with me. Establishing rules for your data management plan. So the first thing that you want to do is standardize your naming conventions. And you'll notice free text fields is crossed out there. Why? You want to avoid free text fields whenever possible. Free text fields, if you're not sure what they are when people can manually enter the data into a field instead of having a drop-down or a multi-select field. So actually, a few weeks ago, I was a victim to this. I was looking for customers who use a particular product that we sell, and the company name starts with an acronym. It's overall just an odd name because it's all lowercase letters. There's weird apostrophes and things throughout it. It's kind of a difficult one to deal with. So right there, it's a candidate for errors. And what I found was the data that the CRM returned to me was really only half right, because before we implemented the drop-down replacement for that product, people had been entering their own descriptors. So their interpretations ranged all over the board from some people would write the name in all caps, some people would exclude the apostrophe, some people would only write the first 3 letters of the product name. So it was a free-for-all, and that was definitely a red light for why free text fields are the best to avoid whenever possible. As I mentioned, we now have a drop-down in there, which made it a lot easier. But, that's just reflecting that they increase the likelihood of data entry errors. So anytime that you can replace a free text field with a drop-down menu or a multi-select field, do it. Okay, so then when it comes to abbreviations, you want to be selective about which words you're going to abbreviate, and you want to keep that consistent across the board. So for example, Technology Advisors, Inc., what are we going to do with that in the CRM? Are we going to capitalize I, capital N, capital C? Are we going to make it all lowercase with a period at the end? If you're a writer or you're familiar with style books like AP style, similar concept. Everyone has to adhere to the abbreviation style that you select. Spelling out numbers is a best practice to avoid errors and create consistency. So consider that as an option for your data management playbook. So as example, instead of the number 3 for 3rd Street, you would write out THIRD, 3rd Street. Indefinite and definite articles, they can sometimes muddy the waters. Sometimes it's not an issue, but I've seen it happen. It can muddy the waters at times. So one best practice you want to consider for that is either leave them out completely or move them to the end of the record name. So in the example I have here, we're showing that you could write the Blues Brothers as Blues Brothers, but what I didn't show there is that you could also write it as Blues Brothers the. And then punctuation, best practice, avoid it. Putting punctuation in the wrong place is going to affect the quality of your data. So, if you're typing USA and you don't put the dots in between, everyone's still going to know it means United States of America. So just if you don't need it, if you don't absolutely need the punctuation, recommend leaving that out, just making it easier on yourselves. Okay, so then creating data entry and deduplication rules. So in all likelihood, you have some duplicate data in your system. If you're not sure if a record is a duplicate, that's where we go back to asking the record owner, making sure that, is it possible that we have 2 companies with similar names? We don't want to accidentally delete something that we shouldn't be deleting. So best practice for dealing with duplicate data is to merge those records again, instead of deleting, to make sure you're not losing that valuable info. And I can't stress that enough. Workflow rules. Oh, sorry, I skipped one, didn't I? Okay, so required fields. Many of you probably are aware of required fields already if you are a CRM admin or if you've joined any of our user groups where our CRM experts have mentioned this a couple times. Basically, the admin can indicate required fields to be entered before a record can be saved. So if you go back to your list of your most valuable data assets, you want to look at those and say, are any of these currently not required? And if not, is this something that we want to make a mandatory field? And that's a conversation that you can have with your team. And again, that goes back to the whole prioritizing. If something's in your top 3 of most important data asset to your business and you're not requiring that to be entered into your CRM, there's an issue right there. Workflow rules. So workflow rules have pros and cons. A pro is it's less frustrating for the end users. The workflow can automatically update a field to match your preferred nomenclature. So for example, if somebody does enter the U.S.A for USA and you just want capital U, capital S, capital A, the workflow could autocorrect that. The issue happens sometimes when you get kicked back an unexpected iteration of the piece of data. So that's just something that you should keep an eye on when you institute the workflow. And that's also something that the designated enforcer of your data management plan should be looking for is, okay, we have this workflow set up to auto-correct this information. I'm doing my 1-month analysis of what's been going on, and I'm going to look at that and make sure that it's working and functioning as it should be. And then validation rules. Those are a little bit stricter than the workflow rules. That's going to enforce the data entry formats that you are establishing with your data management. So that's when you've probably encountered that before, when you've tried to enter information into your CRM and you get an error message if you try to save the data incorrectly. So one of the common things you'll see is if you're entering a phone number and you only put 6 digits in there, the system physically won't let you save it until it's corrected. So that's one way to really gain control over the way that people are entering data and force them to standardize those naming conventions. Okay, and then last but not least on this slide, documenting what you did. So once your data management rules are established, you create the documentation and then you share that with the team. The documentation should include the rules for the naming conventions, the data entry, protocols if there's deduplication. Again, we're thinking of this like a style guide for our database. And I would recommend keeping it in a shared place. Like at our company, we use a shared drive where we can all see and have access to certain documents. And that's a really great time saver if, let's say, one of your policies changes or one piece of data becomes more important than another and you change how that is used in the CRM. You can edit that and know that everyone has the most up-to-date version of your data management plan. I mean, you can make static versions as well if you prefer, but we definitely recommend having it in a shared place that updates in real time over anything static. Okay, and then the last thing that you want to consider with your CRM data management best practices is training your team. So that involves getting those digital copies or printed handbooks out to all your team members, setting aside a training session to go over that document, answer any questions anybody might have, and basically just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and they all know what's expected. You also want to incorporate that into your onboarding process for new employees as you move forward. During their orientation, they should receive that document and be instructed on how to utilize it. And going back to what Matt said, somebody has to be the enforcer of these rules, or a few people depending on your company size or your needs. So you need to designate an admin or a team leader to do those spot checks and monitor the data on a regular basis to make sure that everything is staying on track. So if there are any questions, please let us know. As I mentioned before, there's that document at the bottom of the screen there that summarizes all this. I'll also send the slide deck and some helpful clips as well. That will probably get out to you by tomorrow. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if your company is ready to start doing some of these things and maybe you're a little lost or you're a little overwhelmed, I know we all have limited time these days. Let me or Matt know. We can help you with this stuff. As I mentioned, Matt is a database security expert, so he has great insights on this. And as you know from working with technology advisors, we are CRM experts, and we have a lot of really knowledgeable people here who can get you guys on the right plane for where you need to be with your data. We just want to make sure everybody's safe and that they can use the information in the best way possible for their business. So that encompasses CRM security without a doubt.
Hey, Janine, this is Matt. I had one other tool that I wanted to share with everybody. and I was going to put it in the chat, but I thought I'd just chime in here. This is an SQL tool, and it's BSQL, which is kind of funny. Hacker, it's called BSQL Hacker. It's an injection tester, handles blind time-based SQL injection attacks. So you can basically attack yourself and see where the holes are. So,
Okay.
yeah, and I love the cleaning tools for Starfish. I think that's great, and I think that's very helpful as well to keep everything tight. So I just wanted to share that one tool with everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
And thanks again to Matt for being here with us for this series. If you missed any of the webinars in this series, you can catch them on our website or on our YouTube page. There's the full recordings, and then there's also clipped out versions that highlight some specific talking points to each of those webinars. Okay. I'll give it another couple seconds here, but hopefully the lack of questions means that you understood everything and we did a good job. But if anything comes up later, I'm just going to assume that that's what it is. Of course, if anything comes up later, please reach out and we will help you out.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Deneen. I appreciate it. I always enjoy these.
Thank you. I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your week. One more day and then the weekend, so enjoy.
And it's Friday Eve. Enjoy.
Mm-hmm. All right, goodbye, everybody.
All right, everybody. Be safe.